if you've worked hard, you do deserve to reward yourself to some extent. But it depends, are you playing the short game or the long game? Because my game was, I'm not going to take a short-term reward for the long-term reward of my own place or my own furniture or whatever the case is. So it's balancing those two worlds of not going to either extreme, because also you don't want to save your whole life and then I walk out of here and I get hit by a bus.
From CNR JUTA De BEER, imi nomsindisi wesiko, umvelisi mnqango umelisi wesizwe, formerly known as Lwazi Madonsela, bringing you a show about creative entrepreneurs live from the landmark that not only birth SA street culture but also formalizes street hustle. On today's episode we have Anthony Bila, fly on the wall Anthony Bila.
What's going on, Lwazi?
Blessed,
man. Stressed and blessed. That duality of life, you know?
You know, every time I'm stressed, I go back to one quote me and the homie said. We're like, but this is what we pray for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone pays or plays or even prays for stress, but it's part and parcel of your blessing, you know?
Yeah.
It's part of the journey. Like, if there's day, there must be night. It's the same principle. So, I mean, you just learn to work with it.
Most people know you as a photographer.
Correct.
And then most people saw you slow down in frequency of posting as a photographer. And some might have looked at it as, he's still shooting, what does he do?
Yeah.
In pop culture terms, someone else might be like, did he fall off?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see him at no event. I don't see him shooting anyone I know. But you'll get the notifications that he's presenting with brand A and brand B.
Yeah.
Testing out the equipment.
Yeah.
Doing masterclasses on the equipment. And then you'll see some shots on his socials that BTS, never holding the camera anymore, he's holding the little monitor.
Funny guy.
To the next guy who doesn't know you,
what
would you describe this current phase of your life? What are you doing? Occupation-wise.
I mean, that's quite an accurate description, so, you know, blessed for that. But I would define it as transformation, man. It's kind of a chrysalis even, you know, like a bug or a worm turning into a butterfly or a moth or whatever the case is. And I think, ironically, I'm kind of returning more to what I was as a kid, which is just like an out-and-out creative with mediums as outlets. And as many creative outlets as, you know, a river has tributaries or as a tree has branches. It's the same principle for me. So at the core, I'm just a creator, you know. I'm just someone who makes things, who ideates, who wants to make things that make a difference in people's lives or people feel or connects with or just impact them in some way, inspire them, things that they love or they hate. But I guess it's to make an impact. Yeah, it's to make an effect. So the technical terms for that will be creative director, creative consultant, business owner, photographer, director, illustrator, painter, visual artist. Like, those titles don't really mean much to me. It's more, I have to use them strategically for the bag, but I just think of myself as, you know, someone who is a creator, is an artist, and those things are interchangeable. You know, I don't have this thing like creators are people who make YouTube videos and artists are people who paint on canvases. I mean, if you create and you're creative, it can apply to anything. It could be an accountant, it could be a plumber, it could be the best guys for it are guys like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, who weren't defined into one thing. You know, they were visual artists, they were painters, they invented flying machines, they were biologists, their interests didn't stick to one thing, and no one really does. But I think we did get into a phase, particularly like our parents' generation, that boomer phase, when the Industrial Revolution had kind of cemented specialization as a thing, which is still important to an extent, but none of us exist in a vacuum or a bubble. So that's kind of how I like to see it, is everything I do informs the other. And when I get fatigued or tired of one, it switches over to another thing. But then also being a person who's, you know, responsible for themselves and others, I also have to make financial considerations to everything that I do. So I guess, yeah, creator, man. Just call me a creator, I guess.
Speaking of finances, a lot of people, generations, are still going to come up the way you came up.
Yeah.
Taking a passion, turning it into a business. Because you're realizing that there's a gap in the market for the way you view things or the way you create things.
Yeah.
But what's that step that took you from, I'm a photographer, to a creative entrepreneur using your skills that you've acquired through the years?
I mean, it was quite strategic, to be honest. And, you know, the best kinds of strategies no one ever sees as that. They just kind of think things are happening and unfolding. But to dial it back to like the intro, I, as creative outlets as a kid, I would write music, I'd write poems, I would draw, like I would get these Marvel trading cards at school, and then draw them I would draw them at like A4 scale and sell those to other kids when I went to a school in Tembisa called Nyiko. And then when I moved to the suburbs in the 90s, same thing. Like I would go there, sell them to white kids. And that kind of was the beginning phases of turning something I love into something that can sustain me, because I didn't come from the same means as a lot of the kids that were in those schools. And from there, yeah, I kind of learned the principle of it. And like I said, I think I'm returning more to that principle of how do I, as much as I can, do what I'm passionate and I love, but live and live a full holistic life that's not only about my job or my title or anything like that. So yeah, see, I've lost my train of thought now, because you actually asked me something completely different.
How did you switch your passion?
Oh yeah. How do I switch the passion into a business? So it started in high school. After that intro actually was leading up to it. But in high school, we used to rap at break. We used to have ciphers, and we did all kinds of rapping.
Sorry to interject.
Yeah.
I don't trust any man who's never had a fake rap career. Back to you.
It's the original SoundCloud, and before that there was a website called I'll remember the name now, but there was a website pre-SoundCloud where everyone used to upload beats and like their raps. It was like the thing, man, back in like the 90s, like SoundCloud. I mean,
you were on the internet in the 90s.
Pardon?
You were on the internet in the 90s. Damn.
I mean, like late 90s, like the very first version of the internet. But yeah, man, dial-up modems, 28K modems, like, you know, LimeWire.
I found modems by mistake. We're going through my mother's old stuff.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, man. Couldn't even get phone calls if you're on the internet. Your parents would be like, "Yo, get off the internet. I need to make a phone call." That's how like old school it was, you know. Wi-Fi, new concept.
It's a blessing.
New. But yeah, so in school I was rapping at break with friends, and we'd have all of these ciphers. And there was this white kid whose dad works in advertising, and they were going to shoot an ad for Absa Bank, and the concept was like this kid in class gets up and starts rapping to the teacher or whatever the case is. And this kid, like, I didn't really know him, but I was always like cool and kind. Like I was a very social kid in school. Like I would hang out with everyone. I didn't even have a clique, you know. I was like just like a traveling man. I was like a Mos Def. I would just hang out with whoever. So he being kind to him actually paid off, because one day he just came up to me. I was like, "Yo, my dad works in advertising and they want people to audition for this thing. I think you'd be dope. Here's the address." Took it. After school, my dad picked me up. I was like, "Oh, this random kid was like, we should check this out, but it's so silly." Anyway, my dad was like, "Hey, yo, man, what are you talking about? Let's roll, you know?" Went on a road trip with my dad to the city. Showed up late actually for the audition. They were like just about to close, because I was living in the East Rand and my school was in Benoni, and this thing was like in Sandton. So that was like quite a mission. Got there, did the audition, got into the ad. Roll up, you know, fast forward, I roll up to the actual day of the ad, and like I just see the vision of this thing, like cameras and lights and gaffers and spark boys and the whole thing. And I always loved like TV and shows and like storytelling from like my comics and cartoons and anime. And I was just like, "Yo, what is this, you know?" But then being a kid, I was like, I just want to be an actor. I want to be a star. So did the ad, got a crazy bank from that. Took that and put it in like a savings account. Bought my first pair of like real sneakers, because before that my mom used to give me fake Nikes at like a market in Kempton Park in the CBD. And I knew they were fake, but I was always like the happiest guy with my fake like Spiridians, man, or whatever they were. But then I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna go get them," and I got a pair of Cortez. But then that unlocked me to like, "Yo, man, I can do things that I enjoy and still see a monetary outcome out of that." Yeah. So then I started, and based on doing that ad and just being the same kid I was in school on set, asking questions, being inquisitive,
time to everyone,
you know, just being like a human being. Some of the people there from the agency were like, "Yo, we have this thing called the Junior Board of Directors. Come and audition for that." And what it was a group of 10 kids in different age groups that would come in twice a month to the agency and help them brainstorm concepts for ads or help them refine concepts for ads. So they were like a connection to like street level kids working with advertisers to make sure that concepts rang true. The linguistics of it, the concepts were like sense test. It wasn't like, a bunch of 25, 30-year-olds making ads for 15-year-olds and that they completely missed the mark. So, hi, kids, be cool. It was to counteract that. And in that environment, consulting with them, there was obviously like a small check attached to that. I learned a lot about the creative industry. In between that, I worked at a Pick and Pay as a cashier because I still had to make like more consistent bank. But by the time I matriculated, they offered me a job. They're like, yo, man, if you go study advertising and you come back with the qualification, we'll guarantee you a job by the time like you're in second year even. So I continued consulting for them. Went to Boston Media House and did radio production and copywriting. And then, worked with Mo Flavor at YFM, did a few things. But all of that stuff was me still using creative outlets because I knew that what I was doing at Pick and Pay as a cashier was not sustainable forever because it was not a lot of money. It was long hours. You were dealing with a lot of rude people. It just wasn't...
But it was a means to an end at the time.
Yeah. But what that taught me was commitment and consistency and, showing up every day for something. And I think that's what differentiated me a lot from other creatives who just, were like this one kid in school I remember called Bransby. This guy had like the talent level probably close to a Messi level, and he was the most talented guy in the soccer team. No discipline, never showed up for practice, would like just be, he was like a Balotelli, man, like all the potential in the world and never committed. And I remember playing in school and being like a midfielder and always like admiring his skill level, but like also realizing like his skill and his talent only got him so far. And the rest of it was commitment, was dedication, was showing up. And that's what that job taught me. But all of that stuff was how I converted, being a creative person into a job. It was all of those means to an end. And then obviously I graduated, worked in advertising for 10 years.
Got your guaranteed job.
Yeah. I was working full-time basically from second year, which was hard, but, at least I could afford things. No, not bank, but like the things that I could afford that other kids' parents were paying for, they assume my parents were paying for when I was doing it, That was the only difference. It was just like, it was leveling me. And that's the thing with like privileged people don't understand. Your privilege and what you see me doing, it may look like we're on equal footing, but what I'm having to do to meet you where you are is probably different if I don't come from the place that you do. Me driving a third-hand Polo classic 1.6 with a broken radiator that I have to stop on the highway every 20 Ks, which I actually had to do because my first car was that, is not the same as you getting a Polo from your dad or in matric, like, yo, here you go.
Yeah.
You might see it the same, like, oh, aren't we both driving Polos? Bro, I'm not chilling on weekends like you were, And that's the thing we take for granted because we see the veneer of a person's life, but we don't have the inner workings and the foundational understanding of where they come from. So, yeah, man, it was all of those things intertwined that taught me that. But advertising is a cruel and harsh mistress where it's kind of like the Marines or like the SEALs, Everything you learn there, you're going to use for the rest of your life, but it'll if you don't get out before it takes everything from you, it can like burn you out. It can destroy you. I know people in advertising who, when they stopped, a friend of mine became a butcher in Japan. Another one became a barber. Like there's people who they reached their end point with advertising and they never wanted to do anything creative again. A lot of them became like quite artisanal people with artisanal professions. But I say all of that to say, I worked in advertising for about 10 years and I was like, look, this is not sustainable for me wanting to live a holistic life. So my exit strategy I was working on probably from year 3 or 4, and that was to be a director like I was when I saw that stuff as a kid, rapping in that ad. And so when we would write concepts for directors and stuff, when I was on sets, with the things that I'd written for these ads, I was paying more attention to, how does he direct? How do they move? How do they make all of the stuff work? And then obviously in between that, because all of this is happening in the background to what people are seeing on the internet, which is me on Tumblr with Justice and Innocent and Jeff and all of those like foundational guys of like 2010 Tumblr. That's what people are seeing because that's another outlet that for me is just an escape from the writing every day and like, making ads for Omo and all kinds of random things that I don't really care about. And by the time that I was reaching my endpoint with advertising, the photography, which was purely just a hobby in the beginning, had started to get this momentum of its own.
Is this because you're funding it through your money from advertising?
Yeah. So
what I've come to learn is photography's skill is 20%.
Yeah. I mean, skill is probably even less than that, man. Photography, a lot like drawing, is something you can learn. Like, there are principles behind these things that you, even if you're not born talented, there are people that are gifted, and that talent is what gets them the first 10,000 hours, because it's like an instinctive thing that they may have. But trust you me, people like Seth, people like Lwazi are putting in hours and hours of work to further refine their style. So that's how it happened for me, is like using all of those side things. Photography kind of was gaining its own momentum. And in the beginning, I didn't have a camera because I couldn't afford it. Because the advertising job paid, but it didn't pay that well. And
it was survival money.
It was survival money, exactly. And then what happened was I had this friend called Silas, and he used to have a camera. It's a guy I went to school with in Benoni, actually. And he would borrow me the camera on weekends. I'd come to BRAAM, and neighborhood market had just begun. And, I'd been watching Tumblr, and I kept seeing all of these Tumblr stories and like things about like the sartorialist and all of these guys. And I was like, this is cool, man. Like, because I also like clothes. I was like, these guys are just shooting street style, but like, I'm not seeing people that look like me. I'm not seeing the places that I come from. And then that's when I would borrow the camera and start taking photographs. And then again, that was just purely just something that felt like I had to do. It felt like a calling.
Yeah. And
I would come to BRAAM, shoot like other kids wearing whatever clothes they had, and I'd post that on the Tumblr. And that gained its own momentum, which got me a job, my first photography job with Mr. Price. And then there again, I saw that Mr. Price was like, yo, we'll pay you this money, come to Durban and shoot this campaign for us. And I was like, wait a minute. This one campaign is paying me my monthly salary times 2, 3. Like, this is another escape.
Is this before you even have the camera?
Yeah. So I had to actually like borrow a camera to shoot that first campaign. I was like, because actually when they phoned me, I was about to be like, yo, man, I don't have time for this. Like, why am I going to Durban?
Yeah.
And they were like, yo, we're going to pay you X amount. And I'm like, yo, hold on a minute. Let me get back to you. Got the camera, went to Durban, shot. With that money, put it all back into the equipment. Because now I'd seen like, yo, this is an avenue. And then when that gained momentum, I quit advertising. But I built enough of a network and a foundation that I could still consult, still make like side bank there. And photography became like the main passion. Yeah. But it was still only a means to my ultimate goal of film directing. And that I saw was going to get me closer, because it brought me more than financial comfort. It bought me time. And advertising didn't, because we'd work 10-hour days. There's days we'd sleep over at the agency, shower, go back. It was a time-consuming thing, and that's the thing. And that's the only commodity we really have is our time. And that for me became like, okay, this photography thing I love, but it's going to buy me the time to learn directing and build a foundation there. In the same way that this really talented illustrator and designer called Nick Christowitz, who was one of the founders of Father Coffee, I remember him telling me that like for the first 3 years of his post-studying life, his parents were a big support for him, and he could kind of be more selective about the work that he was taking on as a designer and an illustrator. And it took that 3 years for him to be fully self-sustaining. And in that time frame, he built an amazing portfolio because he could choose, because he had the time.
Yeah.
Versus a kid from the hood might have to take every job that comes on the table, which dilutes what they might want to do in their actual skill set, because it's survival mode. And that's the thing that I'd realized with like, yo, photography is going to buy me time, because if I just get 1 or 2 gigs every other month, I live simply, I'm not going to ball, build up savings, and what I'm going to do is like focus on building that foundation.
How do you create the structure? You have the foundation, how do you create the structure, financial structure? Because a lot of us, you work this hard, it's a passion thing, it finally connects. But you've never had 100K just cleared in 7 days.
Yeah.
How do you build that structure? Say, even if I am moving out, even if I am living somewhere, how do I maintain my rent without paying the rent and now I'm starving?
Yo, man, that's a difficult one because it's circumstantial, right? It'll depend on where you come from and where you call home and how comfortable home is. So I only moved out of home when I was 29, and all my homies would always rag me for it. They were like, yo, bro, like, come on, man. Like, why are you home? You're almost 30. But what they didn't realize again is that behind the scenes, I was saving like Goldman Sachs. Well, maybe not Goldman Sachs because they didn't save nothing. But I was saving like a prestigious bank with like resources,
Yeah.
And I had a goal that by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have moved out and have a fully furnished place and then have enough to pay my bond for a year if I decide not to work. That was my goal. And other friends of mine were laughing and teasing me and like, we're buying cars, we're doing this, we're balling. Bro, you're still going back home. But for me, home was easy because my parents didn't put me under pressure. They supported me in giving me a place to stay. They encouraged me to save. They created an environment where living at home wasn't the worst thing. Obviously, as you get older, you want, your freedom and space, but it was something I could live without because I had an end goal. And so for me, that was the end thing, is that like I saved like crazy. And then I found a place that I liked, put down a big deposit on the place. Once that came through and the bank kind of gave me security for that, in 1 week, I remember my mom also being like, yo, man, how much have you been saving? Because the one weekend, I bought everything for the house. Like, I bought the couch, the fridge, the washing machine, utensils. Like, I was just like,
nitty-gritty.
Every curtains, Chanel, or like a vacuum cleaner. I just went with my mom for some of the stuff. Some of the stuff I went with my dad. But one weekend, copped it. I was like, cool, everything's going to arrive in a week's time. Stayed home for that week, and then the stuff, when it started coming in, I just kind of took it.
How does that week feel, though?
It was overwhelming, man. It was like exciting. Because now
it's here.
Yeah. But I mean, it was exciting, and it was great because it gave you like a chance to say goodbye, in a sense, to home in a way that was like momentous, because that this is
not
probably
running away. Also,
exactly.
Starting a new chapter.
Yeah. So I mean, it was amazing because like I got to spend time with the family in a very different way that felt like an evolution and a change. And again, this whole story was to tell you the point of it was to say my circumstances are very different to someone else who might come from Mpumalanga and it's them here, or they come from Pretoria and they need to live in Joburg because access and potential is here. So everyone's circumstances are different, but what I will encourage is building savings. Like, do not ball, do not live for, don't live with just this carpe diem mindset of like, another bag will come, or tomorrow is not promised. Like, set aside at least half, if you can, of whatever you're making, or whatever means you can, and build a savings and have a strategy for it, because it's going to be different for everybody. And like, that's why I don't like to ever give generic advice. Like, if I sit with someone one-on-one and they tell me their circumstances, from my perspective, I can give you advice, but it's still only from my perspective. Your lived experience is going to be very different. So like someone going, just work hard, man. You can do it. Just look out, or like just save. I'm cognizant that some people can't even save because every cent is going somewhere. So it's a tricky thing because I was lucky, I was opportunistic, I worked hard. There was a lot of things that came together to make it happen for me that might not be the same for anybody else. But there's some general principles, like if you do clear 100K, don't go, I'm going to fly to New York with my homie for a weekend and spend it. Or I'm going to buy Balenciagas that are 15K. That's not going to enrich your future. A lot of the money I got, I often reinvested into myself or my equipment or
what's
something.
What's reinvesting into yourself? Because to the next guy, I need the Meezys, man. They're comfortable.
I mean, if your brand is about fashion and all of that, then the Yeezys make sense. It's all contextual to what you do. So if people know you as a style guy, those Yeezys, you buying them is likely going to gain the attention of Adidas, which can, land you in a deal with them. Then it makes sense. But if you're an accountant and you come into the bag or whatever, what are Yeezys going to do in that general plan? But then there's the flip side of that is, if you've worked hard, you do deserve to reward yourself to some extent. But it depends, are you playing the short game or the long game? Because my game was, I'm not going to take a short-term reward for the long-term reward of my own place or my own furniture or whatever the case is. So it's balancing those two worlds of not going to either extreme, because also you don't want to save your whole life and then I walk out of here and I get hit by a bus and my savings were for somebody else to enjoy. So that's the balance.
You've given more jewels than most.
I mean, what's strange is it doesn't feel like that to me because I'm quite allegorical, man. So I just like to tell stories again, and if you find a lesson in it, dope. But like,
pull it up.
Pull it up. I try not to be. What's the word, man? There's a film term for it, but I forget it. But it's all didactic. I try not to be didactic about the things that I do, because there's nothing worse than like anyone in general, but particularly like older people in any industry and even in the creative who are like, you know, as an OG, sit down, fellas, let me tell you about something. Yeah. Like, man, relax, dog. Like, you know, because I learn as much as it can impart to you. There's things that I learn from people of all age groups all the time. And that's what I'm more interested in, is not being some guru type OG.
Yeah.
Man, I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, because we're both existing at this very moment, and that's all there is. And your whole experience can trigger something in me and vice versa. So I just see it as an exchange. But if you're learning or you're gaining gems, man, then, you know, bless.
The one question, which is one experience that's very common with most people who are independent creatives, creative entrepreneurs, most importantly, is burnout.
Yeah.
How do you maintain not burning out? Because, like, the goal is to shoot this ad, the goal is to shoot this film, the goal is to submit 1, 2, 3, and I still want to work on a personal capacity.
Yeah.
How do you?
I mean, it's learning when to walk away from certain things, and it's a very hard thing when, you know, means or money is presented in front of you and it's serious bags. And we all, I think, as creatives and just young people in general, are on the precipice of burnout all the time, because number one, we're overstimulated. The working world, the world of capitalism, is telling us more, do more, be bigger, like live a certain way, have a certain car, have certain clothes. So for me, it's finding the inner voice and inner peace to just stop when you're content or there's enough. And that's a very hard place for people to find. But also, we're often the captains of our own demise, you know. We take on too many things because it's not greed, but it's over ambition, you know, or like just seeing the end goal without realizing the steps that are going to get us there. So the one thing that I do is always like try to prioritize, like, what is going to have the long-term benefit from me. What do I need to do for each job, and what capacities does that take out of me? So now that I've got more of a team and a support structure, I'm still like stretched thin, but there's more people to support and to hand work over to. And sometimes it's like, handing things over to other people and just spreading the means that you have, because you never know how that comes back. There's lots of jobs. Like, I remember working probably the hardest job I've ever done for 3 months. And it's the one job that's actually made me want to quit creative work altogether, because it was that difficult. And in between that job, I was getting other opportunities to do jobs, 50K here, 100K here, you know, and I could have been the greedy guy who just says, I'm not available, sorry, and left it. But I mean, like a photography group with a bunch of other young people, all I saw was an opportunity to like pass on that work and go like, hey man, you're going to lose some bags, but who would you rather lose them to? Is it like other people that look like you, that know the struggles of being a black creative in this country? Or am I just going to say no and let someone else get it because, you know, I don't want to create competition for myself? Or what if they work with those people and they like them and then they develop a relationship? That's a good thing. Like, there's a saying about like everyone gets a slice of the pie. That saying is a lie, because there are multiple pies. And beyond that, there are bakeries who are baking those pies. And the myopic mindset that gets instilled in young black creatives and creators in general is that like you're each other's competition. When the competition is not each other, it's breaking the industry and the institutionalized versions of it where they pitch you against each other. Which, I mean, I'm even subject to as a director and a photographer. They'll go, here's a brief for a project. Project's R1 million, but pitch against these 3 other people. So now we all have to dance for daddy, you know. We've got to twirl, bring out all the stops. My idea is the best, and then hope to be chosen, you know. And it's no different to being what in this country some people would term as like being stogo at like a club, where the guy with all the bottles and the means, the girls will be there and he'll go, cool, I want this girl, or whatever the case is. There's a level of that we all are subject to. It's just what part of yourself are you selling? And it just happens that the part of myself that I'm selling is my mind and my time and my creativity, where it could be something else for somebody else. So for me, it's just it's a time, case, and space thing, but be selective over the work that you do and look at how much input is in a job, because there's certain jobs that are not glamorous that I'd rather take because it's low threshold work, and like those are the jobs that pay the salaries at the company that I co-own, versus a cool job that might look cool to the world, but it's difficult. The threshold or the yield from it is low. It's going to just be a headache. I'd rather walk away from that job and secure one that gives us time again to work on personal projects at the company or whatever the case is. So it's measuring that balance of like, am I doing this for the cool or am I doing this for the bag? There's actually a cool triangle that I once saw called good, cheap, fast. And that's something that I use with a lot of clients. And whatever I do to avoid burnout, I look at that. Is this job going to be good and cheap or fast and make us rich, or whatever the formula is for it? Yeah. And that's what I've got to look at every single time. Like, is this job going to give me clout? Is it going to give me brand recognition because I've worked with Nike or Adidas or whatever that brand is? Because that can strategically place you in different conversations. Yeah. Is it going to be a serious bag that sets me up financially? Or is this going to be a fulfilling job for my creative core and who I am as a person? And if it doesn't tick one of those two boxes, the job's got to go. And yeah, that's probably the easiest way that I refine burnout. But it's still very difficult, and I've come close to it. And even right now, like I'm on maybe 10 or 12 different projects. I'm overseeing things. There's things that I'm shooting. Cameras are launching. It's a lot. But I've also set an end date to go beyond this date. Whatever comes in, bar it being, Yeshua himself going, I'm handing you
1.6 million clean just for you.
I mean, it depends. Again, it would have to be an extremely good opportunity.
You do have a price to 12 for daddy.
Yeah, man. I'll some people will joke about my TikTok that I do this twirl to show my outfit. I will do it happily. Like, I will do it happily. Like, it's a means to a great end. It's a means to an end. And like I said before, we all sell ourselves. We just sell different parts of ourselves,
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Title of the podcast, Corner Juta De Beer.
Yeah.
Giving flowers to everyone who's inspired us, continues to inspire, graduated from these ends, and have created a school of the new breed. And you're part of those people. And the one question I always ask is, do you think we still need a landmark like this, Corner Juta De Beer? Or is the internet our new safe space?
I think physical spaces are very important, but they are hard to come by in South Africa because, number one, we don't have the infrastructural support from institutions, from government, from all those places to create art hubs or art districts that foster their creativity. Like, a really great example of it is South Korea. South Korea's entertainment and creative and arts industry is worth billions and billions of rands. K-pop, K-dramas, Oscars being won by Bong Joon-ho and a whole host of actors from that country are like running the creative world, at least in the film industry and the music industry and the TV and series industry, because government purposely invested with purpose, to use a double entendre. But that's what we lack here. And to answer your question, we still need physical spaces, and it's something that I'm working and fighting and trying to do, but it's very difficult to create spaces in communities, particularly in the hood and townships, where people can come in, test our camera out and like shoot photographs and understand what that is, use the editing equipment and see what it's like to be an editor, to show them the means that you can escape your situation. Like, there's a guy I remember who did these comics, I think it was in Do Comics or Mdu Comics or something, and he taught himself how to illustrate and animate from scratch, just from YouTube videos.
Jason dude.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's him. But I remember seeing his story years ago, and he taught himself all of this stuff, created like his own series, all of that stuff, and Nedbank, a few institutions like came and gave him serious money. And I think that's how we change this whole crisis of youth unemployment, is create like, as important as universities and varsities and all of that stuff is, I'm not taking away from it, but it's not everyone's journey and it's not the way that everyone's going to make it. Create institutions and places, whether it's artisanal, for plumbers, for whatever the case is, for them to learn a skill that they can turn into a business, like the same way that I did, and create a small little hub. That's how we break that thing. But if you don't even have access to that information to be aware of how many opportunities are out there, you're going to think it's either crime, or I must play soccer, or I must be a DJ, or it must be like, look, you know, the 5 or 6 things that everyone kind of instinctively gravitates towards. And there's so many other things that are out there. And I look at countries like Tanzania and Kenya, where they are creating this currency and this like hunger in young people to create their own situations, but they're facilitating it in a way that like gives them opportunities, because you can be as talented as you want to be, but if you don't have an opportunity to monetize or change that thing into something real, the best, you know this, bro, like the most talented people I ever knew in the hood often never ended up anywhere because there was no opportunity for them. And the talent, there was a guy I knew, he could build computers from scratch. He built a car, never going to an engineering school, that works. He built like a small electric car from nothing except pure talent. Now imagine him going to an MIT or having small institutions that like facilitate and help him build that. We could have had Elon Musk's and whatever the case is without the Elon Muskness, if you know what I'm saying. And that's the saddest thing for me, is that like a lot of talent gets lost in the wayside because it just never realized an opportunity. There's people 100 times more talented than me doing the things, like could have been doing the things that I'm doing, but just never had the opportunity that could have been like world changing, you know? And I'm very cognizant of that. And that's what kind of breaks my heart. And that's what I think having those physical spaces does. Because for me, going to BRAAM from the East Rand every weekend, going to Gandhi Square when I used to rap on the train, those places created a community of like-mindedness. And sure, the internet does that to an extent, but there's nothing like being in a physical space and feeding off the energy and experiencing it and growing and also stumbling on things. The thing about the internet often is that you only find what you go looking for, and that's going to be an echo chamber of what you know. And that's why even the referencing a lot on the internet is so myopic or so limited, because you can only go where you know. That you can't find unknown unknowns very often, versus a physical space like a library versus the internet. I can scroll through books, stumble on a book about Jean-Paul Gaultier or whoever, and find a whole new rabbit hole of interest. And that can surely happen on the internet, but it's less likely because algorithmically and just instinctively, people go back to the things they're familiar with. Like if you ask most people, or you check the history on their phones and their websites, it's going to go to more or less the same things that they visit every other day. And that's a big limiter. And that's why physical spaces, running into strangers, seeing how different people from different areas come to this place and manifest their creativity is going to unlock new things. So I'm always going to be for physical spaces, but like I said, it's a hard thing to do. And even BRAAM, you know, as dope as it is only limited to a limited amount of people. If you from a different province, what does BRAAM mean to you? What is the BRAAM of Mpumalanga, Limpopo, KZN, you know?
So for the person who's in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, KZN, what's your word to the youth?
I mean, like, my word to the youth is the same thing that I say to myself. Just stay curious. Like, don't limit yourself to the things that you are exposed to, or to the people telling you like what's cool or what's not. Stay curious about everything, question everything, look for information everywhere, and like don't limit it also to the internet. Like go to physical spaces if you can, buy books, lend books, you know, go to secondhand bookstores, find different places and lean into things that make you uncomfortable and that you're unfamiliar with, because those are going to be likely the places you grow the most. And you're going to experience the most change, and it's going to inform a very unique world perspective. And for me, it's just stay as curious as possible. Question absolutely everything that comes into your space. And question yourself even. Yes, sir.
Rulani Anthony Bila.
There you go.
Blessings. Appreciate this. A lot of insights. Might do a part 2. Say that in the comments if you want it.
Bless.